The Imperial Japanese Navy and Army fielded dozens of fighters in World War II, from the legendary Zero to desperate late war innovations. This video breaks down every important aircraft they put into the Pacific sky. Let's begin with carrier-based fighters. A 6M0, designated Zeke by the Allies, the Zero became the most iconic Japanese aircraft of the war. With its extraordinary maneuverability, long range, and capable 20mm cannons, it dominated the early Pacific theater. Lacking armor protection and self-sealing fuel tanks, it prioritized agility over pilot survival, a philosophy that would prove costly as the war progressed. Despite later being outclassed by American fighters, the Zero remained in production until 1945, a testament to its original brilliance. A 5M Claude, the predecessor to the Zero, this fixed landing gear carrier fighter saw action in China and the early Pacific campaigns. Though obsolete by Pearl Harbor, its open cockpit design and impressive maneuverability made it a capable trainer and second-line fighter. A 7M Repu, codenamed Sam, this was intended as the Zero's successor with superior speed, armor, and firepower. Plagued by development delays and engine problems, it arrived far too late, with only a handful completed before Japan's surrender. N1K1 Kyofu, designated Rex, an unusual floatplane fighter designed to operate from remote island bases without airfields. While innovative, its large central float created significant drag, limiting performance against land-based opponents. J2M Raiden, known as Jack, built specifically as a high-altitude interceptor to counter American B-29 bombers. Stubby and heavily armed with 420mm cannons, it sacrificed the traditional Japanese emphasis on agility for raw climbing power and firepower. Moving to land-based fighters. Ki-43 Hayabusa, codenamed Oscar, the Japanese Army's answer to the Navy's Zero. Extraordinarily agile with excellent visibility, it shared the Zero's fatal flaw of virtually no armor protection. Despite being lightly armed with just 2 machine guns, skilled pilots made it a formidable dogfighter throughout the war. Ki-44 Shoki, designated Tojo by the Allies, this interceptor prioritized speed and climb rate over maneuverability. Heavily armed and compact, it represented a philosophical shift toward energy fighting rather than traditional turning engagements. Ki-61 Hyin, known as Tony, Japan's only mass-produced inline engine fighter, powered by a license-built German Daimler-Benz design. Its sleek appearance and heavier construction led Allied pilots to initially mistake it for an Italian or German aircraft. Chronic engine reliability issues plagued it throughout its service life. Ki-84 Hayate, codenamed Frank, widely considered the best Japanese fighter of the war. Combining heavy armament, good armor protection, and respectable performance, it could compete with late-war American fighters on relatively equal terms. Quality control problems and fuel shortages prevented it from reaching its full potential. Ki-100, born from desperation when inline engines became unavailable, engineers fitted the Ki-61 airframe with a radial engine. The result was unexpectedly excellent, creating a highly capable fighter that pilots praised for its balance of speed, maneuverability, and reliability. Ki-27 Nate, an obsolete fixed-landing gear fighter from the late 1930s, it served primarily in China and training roles after proving hopelessly outmatched in the Pacific. N1K2J Shiden, designated George, developed from the Rex floatplane fighter by removing the float and adding retractable landing gear. Its powerful engine and heavy armament made it a capable late-war defender, though production numbers remained limited. Ki-45 Toryu, known as Nick, this twin-engine heavy fighter served primarily as a night fighter and bomber destroyer, armed with upward-firing cannons for attacking from below. While fighters battled for control of the skies, Japan's strike aircraft carried the war to enemy carriers and cities. Next on the list is strike aircraft, the bombers, torpedo planes, and attack aircraft that delivered Japan's offensive punch. B-5N Kate, the torpedo bomber that achieved immortality at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Slow and vulnerable with fixed landing gear, it nonetheless proved devastatingly effective when protected by fighter escorts, sinking multiple American carriers at Midway and Coral Sea. Its enclosed cockpit and three-man crew made it relatively advanced for its time, though by war's end it was hopelessly obsolete. B-6N Tenzan, codenamed Jill, designed to replace the Kate with better performance and increased payload capacity. Engine reliability problems delayed its deployment, and it arrived too late to change Japan's fortunes, serving primarily in the losing defensive battles of 1944 and 45. D-3A Val, Japan's primary carrier-based dive bomber, responsible for sinking more Allied warships than any other Axis aircraft. Its fixed spatted landing gear gave it a distinctive appearance, while its precision bombing capability made it lethal against stationary targets. Lacking armor and self-sealing tanks, it suffered horrific losses once American fighter opposition intensified. D-4Y Suisei, designated Judy, a fast, sleek carrier bomber that could outrun many enemy fighters. Its liquid-cooled inline engine provided excellent performance, but proved mechanically troublesome, and its light construction made it fragile under fire. Moving to land-based bombers. G-4M Betty, perhaps the most infamous Japanese bomber of the war, notorious for its extreme vulnerability to enemy fire. Prioritizing range over protection to reach distant targets across the vast Pacific, it completely lacked armor, plating, and self-sealing fuel tanks. Allied pilots nicknamed it the Flying Lighter for its tendency to explode into flames when hit. Yet its exceptional range made it indispensable for striking far-flung island bases. Admiral Yamamoto himself died aboard a Betty when American fighters ambushed his transport flight. G-3M Nell, the predecessor to the Betty, sharing its emphasis on range over survivability. This twin-engine bomber participated in the earliest Pacific campaigns, including attacks on the Philippines and Malaya. Ki-21 Sally, the Japanese Army's standard medium bomber throughout most of the war. Reliable and produced in large numbers, it served adequately in China, but proved increasingly vulnerable to modern fighters, forcing it into night bombing and transport roles by war's end. Ki-49 Donryu, codenamed Helen, Japan's attempt at a true heavy bomber with increased armor and defensive armament. Underpowered engines prevented it from achieving its design goals, leaving it slower and less capable than intended. Ki-67 Hiryu, known as Peggy, widely regarded as Japan's best bomber of the war. Fast, well-armed, and capable of absorbing punishment, it arrived too late and in too few numbers to affect the outcome. Its versatility allowed it to serve as a torpedo bomber, level bomber, and even kamikaze carrier. P-1Y Ginga, designated Francis, a fast twin-engine medium bomber designed for strikes against shipping. Its speed made interception difficult, though mechanical complexity limited production numbers. Ki-48 Lily, a light bomber that proved inadequate for its intended role. Too lightly armed to survive combat and too small to carry meaningful bomb loads. H-6K Mavis, a massive four-engine flying boat used for long-range maritime patrol across the Pacific's endless waters. Its graceful lines and exceptional endurance made it ideal for reconnaissance, though its size and slow speed made it vulnerable to fighters. H-8K Emily, considered by many the finest flying boat of World War II. Heavily armed, well-armoured, and possessing remarkable range, it could defend itself effectively while conducting patrols thousands of miles from base. continuing with attack and ground support aircraft. Key 51. Sonia, a dedicated ground attack aircraft that served throughout the war, supporting Japanese infantry with bombs and strafing runs. B-7A Ryusei, codenamed Grace, an ambitious late-war design combining torpedo bomber, dive bomber, and reconnaissance roles into one airframe. Powerful and capable, it arrived too late to see significant action. Behind the fighters and bombers flew the unglamorous aircraft that kept Japan's air war functioning. Continuing with reconnaissance aircraft, transport planes, and trainers, the essential support aircraft that kept the war machine operational. Key 46 Dyna, one of the most elegant aircraft Japan produced, this twin-engine reconnaissance plane combined sleek aerodynamics with exceptional speed. Flying too high and too fast for most interceptors to catch, it conducted photographic missions over Allied bases with near impunity throughout the war. Its graceful lines made it instantly recognizable to frustrated enemy pilots who watched it slip away. C-6N Sayun, designated MERT, a carrier-based reconnaissance aircraft designed to scout ahead of the fleet. Fast and long-ranged, it could gather intelligence and return before enemy fighters arrived. Key 15 Babs, an early war reconnaissance aircraft that set multiple long-distance records before the conflict began. Obsolete by 1942, it transitioned to training and liaison duties. E-13 A. Jake, the standard catapult-launched floatplane found aboard virtually every Japanese cruiser and battleship. Reliable and ubiquitous, it served as the eyes of the fleet, spotting targets and directing gunfire across the Pacific theater. F-1 M. Pete, a biplane observation floatplane that seemed antiquated even when introduced. Despite its old-fashioned appearance, it proved surprisingly versatile, serving in reconnaissance, light bombing, and even air-sea rescue roles. E-16A Paul, an improved floatplane reconnaissance aircraft with better performance than earlier designs. Produced in limited numbers, it operated from seaplane tenders and island bases throughout the war's final years. Moving to transport and cargo aircraft. Key 54 Hickory, a twin-engine light transport used for moving personnel and supplies between airfields. Utilitarian and reliable, it kept military operations connected across Japan's far-flung empire. L-2D Tabby, Japan's license-built version of the Douglas DC-3, perhaps the war's greatest irony. Originally an American design, this workhorse transport carried troops, supplies, and wounded soldiers throughout the Pacific. Durable and dependable, it became indispensable despite its enemy origins. Key 56 Thalia, based on a civilian airliner design, this twin-engine transport moved soldiers and equipment to forward bases. Its conventional layout made it easy to maintain under field conditions. MC-20, a converted civil transport pressed into military service as Japan's logistics situation grew desperate. Key 57 Topsy, the Japanese Army's primary transport aircraft, featuring twin engines and a distinctive nose profile. It served throughout the war, hauling cargo and paratroopers to contested airfields. Finally, training aircraft. Key 9, a basic biplane trainer that introduced thousands of Japanese pilots to flight. Simple and forgiving, it built fundamental skills before students progressed to operational types. Key 10, another biplane trainer, descended from fighter designs of the 1930s. Its open cockpit exposed students to the elements while teaching basic aerobatics. Key 27 in dual role, the obsolete Nate fighter found new life as an advanced trainer. Student pilots practiced combat maneuvers on the same aircraft type their predecessors flew in China. Key 79, a simplified version of the Key 43 Hayabusa fighter, stripped of military equipment for training purposes. It allowed students to master a frontline fighter's handling characteristics without risking valuable combat aircraft. Yokosuka K-5Y Willow, Japan's primary trainer, known for its stable flight characteristics and ease of maintenance. Produced in massive numbers, it introduced most Japanese naval aviators to flying. Tachikawa Ki 55. IDA, an intermediate trainer bridging the gap between basic instruction and operational aircraft. Its enclosed cockpit and retractable landing gear prepared students for modern combat types. Finally, we have the most desperate and innovative weapons Japan fielded: the special attack aircraft and experimental jets. As the war turned desperate, Japan fielded radical weapons that ranged from suicide rockets to jet-powered fighters, a final gamble against overwhelming odds. MXY-7. Oka, codename Baka by Allied forces, meaning foolish or idiotic in Japanese. This rocket-powered suicide bomb represented the ultimate expression of kamikaze doctrine. The tiny aircraft was essentially a piloted missile, carried beneath a Betty bomber until released near its target, then accelerated to over 600 miles per hour by solid fuel rockets. The pilot aimed himself at enemy ships with no possibility of return, no landing gear, no ejection system, just a 1-ton warhead and a cockpit. In theory, its incredible speed would overwhelm defensive fire. But in practice, the vulnerable mother planes were often shot down before reaching release points, killing both crews without achieving results. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. Allied sailors dreaded the screaming approach of these human-guided missiles, while Japanese commanders wrestled with the moral weight of sending young men on guaranteed suicide missions. Over 800 Okas were produced, though relatively few saw combat. And the weapon's desperation symbolized Japan's collapsing strategic position more than any battlefield defeat. Ki-115 Tsurugi, named after a legendary sword, this aircraft represented absolute desperation distilled into physical form. Purpose-built as a disposable kamikaze platform, it was designed for mass production using unskilled labor and minimum strategic materials. The landing gear was non-retractable, dropped after takeoff to be recovered and reused, as the pilot would never need it again. Construction was deliberately crude, with a welded steel tube fuselage and wooden wings, reflecting a nation scraping the bottom of its industrial capacity. Each aircraft cost roughly the same as a single automobile, intended to be produced by the thousands using furniture factories and school workshops. Pilots received minimal training, just enough to take off, navigate to the target area, and dive into an enemy ship. Fortunately for those selected to fly it, production delays and quality control problems meant only a handful were completed before surrender, and none saw combat. The Tsurugi stood as the ultimate expression of kamikaze philosophy, an aircraft that acknowledged its pilot as expendable from the first blueprint. Nakajima Kika, meaning orange blossom, represented the opposite extreme, sophisticated innovation amid collapse. Japan's first and only operational jet aircraft, it was inspired by captured German Me-262 blueprints, though Japanese engineers worked largely independently with limited information. Powered by twin turbojet engines mounted beneath a sleek modern fuselage with swept wings, it promised performance that could compete with Allied piston fighters. Ironically, even this technological marvel was intended primarily as a jet-powered kamikaze attacker, designed to carry a single bomb on a one-way mission. The first prototype flew on August 7, 1945, just days before Japan's surrender, achieving successful test flights that demonstrated its potential. Had the war continued, it might have posed a genuine threat to B-29 bomber formations, but history allowed it only a brief moment in the sky. The Kika represented what Japanese engineering could achieve even while their cities burned, a glimpse of what might have been with more time, more resources, and less desperation. From the legendary Zero to the desperate Oka, Japanese aircraft reflected a nation that began the war with technical excellence and ended it with sacrificial desperation. These machines wrote the story of the Pacific Air War.